Hello, 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 and welcome to this edition of the Jolly Heretic. I have a very special guest for you today, and that is the sometime youth worker and charity worker who has been cancelled by the BLM people, Nick Buckley, Esquire, member of the Order of the British Empire. And while I sign into the old entropy, I'm going to ask Nick to introduce himself. So, Nick, over to you.
Hello, everybody. For people who don't know, my name is Nick Buckley. I'm from Manchester in the northwest of England. I had a checkered career, but I spent 10 years at Manchester Council. That got me involved with working with young people, stopping them getting involved in crime. And then redundancy happened, so I took that money and I set a charity up to carry on working on the streets with kids, stopping them getting involved in crime. That led me to getting an OBE off the Queen, our late Queen. And then from that, I've sort of ventured a little bit into politics.
Okay, great. Well, I've just realised that it's not just the signing into the old entropy that I have to do; it's the signing into the old Odyssey. So I'm just going to do that as well before I start. It's very complicated these days, people. I have to tell you, it's there's now that I'm just hello to the Odyssey people. So yes, so this is Nick. I'm just doing into it now. Just switch that off. A feedback loop. Okay, excellent. Well, cheers everybody. Cheers everybody. Hogan, Gulligan, Capis, Saludo, Salud, Prost, Proust, Turbosexy, Slanger Var, and all that, and Skoll. And if I missed anything out, I don't know. To our any viewers that say cheers in different languages. Cheers everybody. Cheers. Cheers, Nick. Cheers, French toast. Cheers, grief. Cheers, Ivan. Shushan. Alberto, whatever. Cheers, Tarantism 1, 2, 3. Cheers, T. Alberto Barroso, Saludo, Salu, and Proust for our Dutch viewers, Hogan Gulligan for our Finnish and Hungarian viewers, and welcome to the Jolly Heretic Prost for our German viewers. We are, of course, online public house, which meets on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. New York, which discuss based science and based research. Shalom to our Israeli viewers, which is increasingly expunged from our woke joke universities on Mondays. It's normally me on my own. Answering the various intelligent questions that you send in throughout the week. And on Thursdays, I have a based guest. We have a very based guest today. Cheers, Nimble Horse, in the form of Mr. Nick Buckley, MBE, with whom we will be discussing the issue of youth crime, what life is like in Manchester, which is where he set up a charity to help the disadvantaged ghettos in Manchester. Basically, the whole degeneration of society into crime, and how people are trying. Some people, anyway, are trying to help these people and create a better life for them, and there are certain nonsense standing in their bloody way. So yes, so skull everybody, and cheers, and hello as well. Cheers everybody, and let me just say cheers to the people watching on the old Odyssey. So yes, so cheers, Spindly Pinion, cheers, all coughing, Slanger, ill coughing, and everybody, and welcome to the Jolly Heretic. If you have any questions for Nick on the issue we're talking about, as I say, it's going to be youth crime, it's going to be multicultural ghettos, basically, and what they're like, and trying to help them and make them better, and whatever. That's the kind of thing. And also cancellation. He was cancelled, which we're going to talk about immediately, for his activities. Then send them in, and we would, of course, answer them today. We don't need a 10-minute intro like Mark Collett, laugh out loud. Well, I'm sorry about that, Heretic, but the problem is that I think I'm realizing now what Mark was going through, which is that he's signing into these various platforms and he doesn't want a feedback loop. And so the only way around it is to have a 10-minute intro. But I've done a 4-minute intro, Mr. Finkelstein, so I think we're okay there. Good. Right. So, Nick, hello. So first of all, we have a lot of people on this down our pub here, the Jolly Heretic, that have been cancelled for normally they're academics, but have been cancelled for various reasons. So before we go into your background and whatever, how did you get cancelled and why?
So if you can go back to 2020, June, a few weeks before, a career criminal in America had been killed on the streets by the police, or it looked like that at the time. And the phrase Black Lives Matter started ringing out across the UK, and I thought, oh, who are Black Lives Matter? I think I've heard of this group. I don't know anything about them. So I went on their website and read what they had to say and realised I didn't like any of this. Defund the police, overthrow capitalism. And the number one phrase that really upset me was disrupt the Western nuclear family. And all I could work out what that meant really was we need to get rid of more men, more fathers out of the home. And that's our biggest problem in the UK. is a lack of fathers at home and a lack of fathers involved with their children and in their lives. So I wrote a 600-700 word blog, and I've wrote many blogs before, put it on my platform and put a link on LinkedIn. It was there for a couple of weeks. Some people commented. Most people didn't agree with what I had to say, but I'd had lots of messages online via email saying, Nick, I read your blog. I like it. I agree with it, but I'm not going to comment online about it. And I was always, straight away, I was thinking, that's a bit strange. I don't understand why they wouldn't. But I was a bit naive at the time. Someone saw the link, copied it, put it on Twitter, and it all went mental within 24 hours. So within 24 hours, somebody had set a petition up to have me fired from the charity I founded. I was chief exec at the charity. A volunteer at the charity is called Mancunian Way. Yeah. Mancunian Way. A volunteer at the charity resigned, emailed the board and told the board he couldn't work for a Nazi and a racist. So the board started panicking, plus there was a lot of abuse online directed at the charity. And the charity board panicked. And I'd appointed the board. They were friends of mine. And they panicked. And in a one-line email, they sent, don't forget, this was during COVID. There was no meetings, no face-to-face. We were locked down in our houses. I got a one-line email saying, sacked immediately.
We were locked down in our houses unless we were engaging in Black Lives Matter protests, in which case it was perfectly acceptable to go out and do anything you liked.
Well, this was Black Lives Connected, so we probably could have met, but we didn't know that at the time. So they sacked me over email. The first week, I was a broken man. I was, upset, paranoid. Everyone's laughing at me. And then the second week, I decided I'm not having this.
So this was all. Sorry, two things. So first of all, when you say that they had said that you were a Nazi and a racist, what exactly had you said in your post that was so egregious as to cause the people that you knew to say that you were a Nazi and a racist?
Well, obviously, I'm bound to say nothing, but let me tell you what the article was about. So the first half of the article was just explaining what I discovered on their website. That to me, this organization sounded like some sort of Marxist organization. They wanted to defund the police, overthrow capital. So I talked about what they said on their website. So the first half, you couldn't critique me because it was basically their website. The second half of the article, I basically said, if we want to improve the lives of Black people in the UK, these are the things we should be addressing. We need to be addressing female genital mutilation. We need to be addressing knife crime, and I think the last point I made was, and let's build more houses because all our children need somewhere to live.
Did you mention the issue of fatherlessness?
No.
No, okay.
No.
So
and
really
the accusation against me basically was writing while white. No one picked anything out of my article that they disagreed with. The accusations was, how dare you comment on a Black issue in a Black group? That was the accusations against me.
Mm-hmm. So the accusation essentially was insensitivity, as they saw it, in a context of what was essentially, if we think back to that time, it was hysteria. Yeah. It's just a period of hysteria, as bad as, worse than when Princess Diana died. The worst hysteria I think I've ever seen. So that was what you'd done, basically. You'd put your foot in it, as far as they were concerned, at a time of hysteria, and therefore you were right for the pig. And when you said that it was this, how did you feel? A lot of people haven't been through this. I've been through this, but a lot of people haven't been. How does it feel? You're in the papers, or at least in the local papers, and people are saying all awful things about you, and you can't really defend yourself. And how did it feel for you? Go through that.
You realise that you're not as mentally tough as you think you are. If you'd have said to me a few weeks before this that something like this is going to happen, Nick, and this is how you're going to feel, and you're going to collapse for the first week, you're going to lock yourself away, you're going to basically be a coward, I'd have laughed in your face and said, not a chance. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've done in my life? Do you know how hard I've had to? I never would have believed it. But when it seems like the world turns against you, and we're social creatures, and we're designed, I think, to pick up on negativity from other people, so we can use that to adjust our behavior. And when it seems like the world's turned against you, the first thing you think of, if you're a normal person, is, what have I done wrong? It must be me. So the first week was all self-reflection. What have I done? What did I say? I could have worded it better, and I could have worded that article better. If I'd have known I was getting international attention on that article, I'd have rewrote it several times. But
and I suppose there's a degree to which we could talk about your background later, but you've come from whatever. I mean, to be a kind of a public figure, at least in a local area,
yeah.
MBE, whatever. And did you kind of feel, God, I just want to be a private person again. I just want to be just a chap in the street. Just I wish I could just be a private rather than a public man.
No, I think the overwhelming feeling was embarrassment. All I could think of was everyone's laughing at me. All those people who have always thought he's full of himself. Look what he's done. He left the council and I didn't leave the council. He set a charity up and I've always wanted to set a charity up. I thought people are sat there going, oh, look how the mighty are falling now. I felt embarrassed that everybody was laughing at me. That was the main feeling.
Yeah, awful. And so well, let's go back then, so that we can get a bit of context on this. So what was your background in you're from Manchester yourself, and what was your kind of social background growing up? Did you have personal experience of these kinds of social issues growing up, or did you know people that did, or what?
Yeah, so my background is single parent household, growing up on a failing council estate, going to a failing school. My school was closed down the year after I left because it was that bad. One of my teachers got stabbed 42 times in the chest. Another teacher got sexually abused several times. That I could walk from my English lesson to my geography lesson through the hole in the wall that other kids had kicked the breeze blocks out of the wall to make an extra doorway. We don't have schools like that now in the UK. This is the middle of the 80s. We forget how bad schooling was, even though it's still quite bad now. Surrounded by crime, antisocial behaviour, no aspirations, nobody working. And
the university entrance rate for this school was not high.
It was practically zero. I got a place at university, but I ended up cancelling it because I thought to myself, I went to sixth form college after the school, and that's what got me into university. Well, could have got me into university, but then I decided, what am I going to university for? I have no idea what I want to do in life.
Where are you going to go? Are you going to go to Manchester University? Or?
No, my grades weren't good enough, so I was going to, I think it was North East London Polytechnic to do economics, because it was one of the only universities I could get in with my 2 E's and a C. I think I got at A level. Okay,
so 2 E's and a C, by the way, in the 80s is probably the equivalent of about 3 A's these days. So what part of Manchester? Central Manchester? Was this an area of Manchester?
Yeah, central Manchester. The place is called Longside. It's literally 2 miles outside the city centre.
Okay, 2 miles outside the city centre. My geography of Manchester is not that good. I know central Manchester. I know Oxford Road, where the university is. And that's about it. So okay, and so then you've had this background, and so what did you do after that? So after from college, what did you do then?
So after college, I worked at Pontin's holiday camp for a season. I didn't know what to do, so I thought, I'll go there. It'll be a bit of fun. Did that, saved up some money, went traveling around America and Mexico for a year. Then came back to the UK. That changed me. Traveling changed me. I always wanted to travel because I used to share a bedroom when I was a child with my granddad. My granddad had been in World War II. He was an officer in the Navy. He'd also been in the Merchant Navy. So he told me many stories of eating snakes in China, going to this island, going to Singapore. So I'd always had.
One assumes that the kind of people that end up being officers in the Navy have a bit of money and don't end up living in a council house where they have to share a room with their grandson.
Yeah, he wasn't a high up officer. He was a petty officer, which is, I think it's
lieutenant.
I'm not sure what it's, but he worked his way up from a sailor and the most he could probably get to was petty officer.
Okay, so maybe it's like sergeant major or something. I don't know.
Yeah, something like
that. Okay, right. So that's pretty up against it, though, isn't it? I would have thought that would be considered overcrowded if a child. Okay, a child sharing a room with a child, fair enough. But a child sharing a room with their grandfather, I'm surprised.
Again, this is in the 70s now. When I was a child, it's classed as overcrowding now, but in the 70s, I mean, we had a 3-bedroomed house. At one point, we had 7 adults and 2 children living in that. At one point,
7 adults.
7 adults. But that was fairly normal at those times. People had bigger families. People didn't rely on the state as much. You couldn't go to the council and complain you're overcrowded. It's like, you've got a 3-bedroomed house, go away. But things have changed now. You can complain to the council and get a bigger house now for anything.
So you and you and a brother, or you and a sister? What is it?
Me and a sister.
Yeah, and your dad walked out when you were how old?
My mum and dad split up when I was 2. I never saw him again, so I've got no recollection of my father. He died then when I was 6.
Christ, so he was quite young when he died, presumably.
Yeah, and it was. And when you think about how he died on Halloween. Him and his friend drunk in a car. He didn't put his seatbelt on, crashed into a lamppost. My dad went through the windscreen on Halloween and died.
Oh,
that's a bit spooky.
Was he dressed up as anything?
No, but I believe from what I got told, he was decapitated. So it just fits into the Halloween bit even more.
A Halloweeny death. We probably shouldn't laugh about it, but it was a Halloweeny death. Okay, so from there, and then you ended up working for Manchester City Council. How did this come about? How did you end up doing this?
Yeah, so that was decades later. So I did all sorts of jobs, self-employed a little bit, signing on, unemployed for years on end through my 20s, and then in my 30s, I spent 2 years at Manchester Airport, and then I went travelling again. And came back and got a job at Manchester Council on a training course. I was early 30s at the time. And that training course led me, by coincidence, to a job in their crime and disorder team. And it was a job they had, which was working with young people to stop them getting involved in crime and antisocial behaviour. So before they'd been arrested, but the police and the council were worried about these individuals. And their thinking was, why are we waiting to arrest them and then do something? Let's look at early intervention and let's do something sooner. So they gave me the job as an experiment, and that turned into a career. And then that sort of then I realized for the first time ever I was actually very good at something particular. I had a knack of working with these young people because I came from the same streets, the same families. I didn't take any BS off any of them. I knew when they were lying. And normally they've been working with, 22-year-old university-educated girls who'd moved to Manchester. And they would spin them stories of, oh, my dad's left, and oh, I'm from a single-parent household, and I got led astray. And when they met me, I was like, no, I'm not having that, pal. You did that because you wanted to do it. And do you know what's going to happen? If you carry on down this path, not only are you going to get into trouble, but we're going to evict your mum from the council house because we're not having people like you living on this estate. And if you carry on, we're going to evict you. So your 7-year-old sister, when she's got nowhere to live, that's going to be your fault. So I was tough love. I went really hard on these kids.
That kind of sounds like what they need. So why is it? Why is it? Do you think that these upper middle class people can't just deal with them in the way they need to be dealt with? Is it some sort of social class induced guilt? Is it are they just stupid? I mean, why is it they can't? Because that seems to me to be quite obvious. That a lot of people like this, if you don't give them boundaries or whatever, then they'll just play up and they'll keep playing up and they'll keep playing up. That's what Black Lives Matter was about. There was nobody to stop them doing whatever they wanted, so they do whatever they want. Yeah, there's no consequences to their actions. So that's what I kind of admire about in African American communities, when they police themselves, they don't take any shit like this.
Mm.
They're just like, look, you're going to get a whopping, and that's it, right? But it's the white middle class that interfere, and it's all like, oh, let's talk about it. Look, how do you feel? How does it make you feel? I'm like, bollocks. No, I don't care how it makes you feel. You follow the law. You're flogged. That's what I see as a reasonable, way of dealing with it. But why is it that middle class people, as a person that is brought up in poverty, why do they behave? Why are they like this? Do you think?
So the people. So let's talk about the young middle class women, and I think part of that is because they want to be amateur social workers. They want to solve your problem for you with emotion, with intelligence. Where when you're born and you're raised on those council estates, that doesn't work, because you already know, we all know right from wrong. They already know what they're doing is wrong. You can't educate them on that. What they've learned is to play the game. What they've learned is, I can get stuff by this behavior because I'm not going to get it these other ways because of whatever reasons. And they need challenging for that. And they need educating that the way you're going about it isn't going to get the outcome you want. You're going to get the negative outcome. It's part of it's cultural. Part of it is you're brought up on those estates, no aspirations, lack of fathers. Most of the people I work with didn't have fathers in the home. The mums can't control these teenage boys anymore now. I remember last time a mum spanked me. I must have been 15, 16, and I'd said something cheeky to her, and she grabbed me and started slapping me on the bum. And she was really annoyed, and I couldn't help but laugh. And that's when she said she realized then I'd turned into a man, because I wasn't afraid of her anymore now, and her corporal punishment didn't do anything to me. So you can imagine that in another circumstance with another kid who's going off the rails. Your mum can't hold you back anymore. But that's your dad's job. Your dad's job is to go, oi, that stops now. Don't speak to your mum like that. Do your own work. Otherwise, you're dealing with me. And once you put that bass in your voice, something triggers in kids. And they go, right, this is serious now. And that's what children need to realise, is sometimes life's serious. And the rules we put in place for them are there for a reason. That's why I called my work Tough Love. I loved these kids. I wanted the best for them, but the best for them wasn't treating them like victims. It was to say to them, sort yourself out.
That's actually interesting. I did a paper on that. I did a meta-analysis on this years ago, and we found that this idea, they say that corporal punishment of kids has bad consequences. That's not true. If you control for the genetics, i.e. people that are mentally ill are more likely to beat their kids, and the kids are mentally ill. But the being mental illness is highly genetic, so that's got nothing to do with the actual corporal punishment. If you control for that, then it has positive outcomes. And of course it does, because it's been practiced for hundreds of years. So it almost certainly is bound to have positive outcomes. You're basically animals dealing with other animals. Dolphins bite misbehaving pups. That's just so that was, I mean, but that hasn't, I don't know how much that's broken down in the UK, but certainly the father element. But the people used to have ambition. I mean, not ambition, that's not quite the right word. There's always been poverty of aspiration among the working class. I mean, my grandparents on my mum's side were working class, and their attitude was, oh, we're working class. Like, it would never occur to them to the idea that, oh, you might even to train to be a hairdresser was something amazing, or a secretary. It's like, wow, crikey. When my mother wanted to be a school teacher, my grandparents said to her, teacher, well, is it realistic? Like, they would have been proud if she'd been a secretary. That would have been good. So there is this positive aspiration, but also there was the sense in which, no, there's certain ways you behave. And if you, even among working class people or lower middle, you get people like Margaret Thatcher. Okay, that's not quite right. She was lower middle class rather than working class. Father was a grocer, but then they go to church and the Methodist church, and you get working class people that would be lay preachers and all this sort of thing. So I mean, are we talking? It's not the Orwellian working class, is it? It's almost like an underclass.
Yeah,
it's what people. My grandparents would have said. We was working class, but then there was them people. They was rough.
Yeah,
and that's a different concept. There's working class and there's rough. It's a bit like chav these days.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what we're dealing with, isn't it? It's the expansion of the rough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I use the phrase underclass We
So was
have
your background underclass or working class?
right on the edge.
Yeah.
Right
But there was
on the edge,
something.
right on the boundary of that. I aspiration wise and achievement wise, benefits, state dependency, I would say underclass, criminality, dysfunctionality, I'd say working class.
So the aspiring underclass, upwardly mobile underclass. It's interesting nuance. It's interesting. Nuance.
And again, who wants to admit that the underclass? So part of me, deep down inside, is going, I'm not underclass. My mum wasn't under. So it's it's a hard one to answer.
Yeah, okay. So, but what you then ended up dealing with? Let's move on to that. So, what you then ended up dealing with so you worked for the Manchester City Council, and then what got you into founding your own charity and this breaking away?
Yes, I worked there for a decade, just under a decade, and I constantly complained. I constantly complained about the bureaucracy, the incompetence, the fact that we could do everything better if we just applied ourselves and tweak this and tweak that. And the answer was always, oh, we don't do that here, Nick. You wanting to cause waves. We don't want waves here. We just do what we do and we keep our head down. That's all we do here. So I was always frustrated at that. And then in 2011, the austerity measures kicked in from the Tory government and councils had huge cuts. Manchester Council lost something like 50% of its funding over several years. So they had big cuts to make. My team and my job went, and I was offered redundancy. I was offered a job in elections and healthy eating, or I was offered redundancy. So I took the money on the table and decided I'm going to set up a charity to carry on this work, and I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do all the things I said the council should do and put my money where my mouth is, and let's see if I was right. So that's what I did. I set up all those projects again that the council had now got rid of, and I tweaked them and I ran them better. And within 2 years, we'd won our first award. Then we started winning national awards, and my charity last week just won its first award in the last 3 years. We just won a national award in Birmingham for keeping communities safe and reducing antisocial behaviour.
Excellent. So, tell people about what is it like on the ground there for people living in their middle class bubble. I have sociological information on the education level and things of my viewers. What's it? You're dealing with, it was mainly with black kids, was it in Manchester that you were working with?
All kids. So obviously Manchester is a very ethnically diverse area, so we'd be working with lots of black kids, brown kids, white kids, mixed race kids. Just imagine whatever you would imagine in the city centre, that's who we're working with. The only group we tend not to work with, which wouldn't be a surprise, would be Muslim girls, because Muslim girls tend not to socialise on the streets.
Yeah, so Islam is doing something right. So you're right. So you've got these so these young kids, and what kind of problems are they dealing with that and how did you help them?
So all our work is actually done on the streets themselves. So it's not about going on the streets and trying to get them into a building or get them into a youth club. We do the work on those streets, on those corners, because a lot of those young people have already been thrown out of the youth clubs, kicked out of school, don't want to go into a building because then you've got to follow rules and regulations in those buildings. They don't want that. They want to be able to live the life they want in their social time on the streets. So we introduce ourselves, might take weeks for them to accept us and chat to us. And then it really is about having some frank conversations and letting them dictate the conversations about the topics and what they want to talk about. And it might start off, simple, such as what do you want to do when you leave school? And let's see where that conversation goes. And if they're talking about, every now and again you get someone who'll say, I want to be a doctor. And then straight away we know your parents are immigrants because they've got dreams for you. But the common answers will be, I want to be a drug dealer. A lot of that is bravado. They don't mean it or don't understand what they're saying it sounds cool to say it. And the next common answer usually is nothing. Don't know what I want to do. I don't want to be anything. And those kids have usually had any dreams and aspirations just kicked out of them throughout schooling, through parenting.
But it's quite, I mean, it's quite the idea that you can think to yourself that you don't want to, that we live in such a decadent society, and that somebody can just say, I don't want to do anything. And they can know that is actually a possibility.
Yeah, it's a choice.
You can get away with, I mean, okay, you won't be able to afford to go on holiday to America or whatever, but you can get away with just doing bugger all. Yeah. Whereas if you go back to, well, I don't know about the 80s, if you go back to the sort of 60s, I mean, you'd get kids that were so poor. I don't remember it myself, but my grandfather would talk about that they would be excused from PE because they couldn't afford underwear.
Yeah.
The kids didn't have underpants. That's how poor they were, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't have socks. Couldn't afford socks. And they'd have to wear these hard shoes, no socks. And that's gone. That would be considered against their human rights to not have socks and underwear. So we're so wealthy that people can just don't do anything. I'll just sod about. I don't know what income support is these days, but so I'll get that and they'll stick you in a flat. So
that's because they don't see any negative consequences to that. What's the worst that's going to happen if I do nothing? Oh well. I'll have £90 a week given to me. I'll have a flat somewhere. I might get some girl knocked up, in which case we'll earn more money then. I'll have plenty of time to smoke dope and play video games. It's not a great life, but do you know what? It's good enough. And
it was good enough for Diogenes the Cynic, and Diogenes the Cynic didn't even get given free money. He had to give philosophical opinions in order to get money. He lived in a barrel. And Alexander the Great said to him, "Look, you're a really great philosopher. I'll give you anything you want. What do you want? One thing you want." He said, "Just get out of my light." This is not these people are not as philosophically inclined, I think, as Diogenes the Cynic. I mean, they'll probably begin their philosophical opinions by saying things like "at the end of the day." They're more like 8 from Viz. So I think that, so. And how did you see any results? I mean, what were your interventions? You got to know these people. You gained their trust. Do you have any excellent any cases where you got some poor kid from this, and then they've gone down? You've been really proud. What are you proudest of?
Yes, I've got. Obviously, we have more failures than successes. We have more failures than successes because this is really, really difficult work. But we have many, many successes. So I remember last year we had a kid in Cheetham Hill, which is a notorious gang area of Greater Manchester. There's constant shootings and stabbings going on there, and we were talking to and got to know this 16, 17-year-old lad. We do a bit of football in the park there sometimes, and he was talking to us and we're asking him what he was going to college. What do you want to be? And he's not sure yet. Maybe a dentist, maybe this, maybe that. I'm working hard at college. I don't want to live in this area. Even though my parents live here, I think I can do better. And he had the aspiration. And then he said to us one day, my biggest worry is my friends here. I've got 8 friends here playing football with. These are my friends. I hang out with them every day. And I'm scared that they're going to ruin my life for me because one of them got stabbed a few days ago. And if I'd have been next to him, I might have been stabbed. 2 of them sell drugs. If I'm next to them and the police turn up, I might get arrested because they're selling drugs. He goes, these friends of mine, and I love them dearly, and they're my best friends. I've grown up with these since we went to nursery. But I think they're going to ruin my life for me. What can I do? I can't leave Cheetham Hill yet. I'm only 17. I've got no money. So over a couple of weeks, we started working out with him a strategy about what he can do to protect himself more. And we came up with, he has friends at college and they're like him. They want a better life. They want aspiration. They want to do something. And he worked out he needs to spend more time with them. He needs to socialize with them. And he needs to spend overtime, spending less time on the streets where he lives, more time at home working at college work, And any spare time at weekends, he needs to be going to where his friends live in other parts of Manchester and hanging out with them. And then suddenly he disappeared for 2-3 months. And then one day we were working in his area and we saw him coming back from the shop, and he came over and he said, I took that advice and that's exactly what I'm doing. And that's why you don't see me here anymore now, because I don't want my friends here to ruin my life. And for those, that's a huge success.
Did he become a dentist or anything like that?
This is only last year.
All right. Okay.
So
I mean, that's true. I mean, the research into it's who you hang around with. I can't talk about certainly with intelligence. If you want to be pushed to your phenotypic maximum intelligence, then hang around with intelligent people.
Yeah.
And they will stimulate you to your phenotypic maximum. If you want to be reduced to your phenotypic minimum intelligence, then hang around with stupid people. Yeah. And that's the thing that we used to have in the UK. I mean, okay, there were lots of bad things about it. I think the age was wrong, but the 11 plus would take kids that were from any ordinary backgrounds, and they get into a grammar school, and they would be basically inculcated with middle classness and associated with aspirational values, as it were. People like John Major. So John Major was from this. If you've read his autobiography, he was really hard up. I mean, his parents had trouble affording. His mother, rather, his father was dead. Had trouble affording the uniform for Rutledge Grammar. And in the end, he admits that he fell in with the wrong crowd, and he ballsed up, and he left with only a couple of O levels, and he tried to become a bus conductor, and they didn't give him the job because his handwriting was too rubbish. And then eventually, of course, he became prime minister. Yeah. So it's something of a success story, but he had every disadvantage in life you can imagine, really.
Yeah,
and that included hanging around with the wrong crowd. You know, yeah. So that's a big thing, and so you've got that. That's one of the things, and what so you intervene, you go up to them, you how do you gain their trust? I mean, these people can be quite aggressive, can't they? I mean, if I've watched Charlie Veitch's stuff, I mean, these people can be quite aggressive and unpleasant. How do you?
Surprisingly, they're not. So what you need to remember is we're not working with criminals. These people are all below that level, mainly. So we're not dealing with hardened criminals, and we're also just working with children. They're just children at the end of the day. And the best thing about working on the streets is if they don't want to talk to you, they just walk away. And that's how you know they're not interested at that particular moment in time. They just turn on their heels and they walk away, in which case it's like, not a problem, catch you next week. And it's about, I employ staff who have really, really good engagement skills. And that's what you need. You need to be able to walk up to strangers and within a couple of seconds have them laughing and joking. Because if you can't do that, you freak them all out. They already think you're undercover police. And if they don't think you're police, they think you're some sort of pedo. So you've got to be able to get them laughing and take some time to get to know them. And then they're very inquisitive. They'll ask questions. And also, a lot of the time, they're bored, stood on the street corner. Just for a couple of minutes, you might be entertainment for them. And they're willing to talk to you because they've got nothing else to do. So if you
don't mind my saying, I mean, obviously we've only spoken twice. I mean, I don't want to make a judgment, but yeah. you have this kind of extremely empathetic, almost childlike in some ways, not in a bad way. I don't mean this in a bad way. Persona. I mean that in the way that genuine and is this something you've developed, or is this actually you? I mean, have you developed this skill to be like that?
No, I think I already had it. I think that's why I was good at it straight away. I've probably got better at it because, like anything, practice makes perfect. I've become better at it. I've always had those two traits that conflict sometimes. I've always been compassionate, but I've always been stern. So I want the best for these kids. I really, in my heart, I want the best for all these kids. And I tell them all the time, we live in the best country in the world and you're here. Doesn't matter how you got here, but you're here. And this country has so many opportunities. And if you mess up those opportunities, it's fine. Because you know what? This country will then give you a load more opportunities until you finally take one. This country doesn't give up on you. And we're here to teach you how to see those opportunities and how to grasp them. Because once you grasp them, your life will get better.
Sorry, people are saying in the comments I called him a child. No, I didn't. I commented on a certain aspect of his persona, which is almost, I would see it as something you can train yourself to do, which is almost like an innocence. And it means, I guess, that if you come across like that as incredibly empathetic and whatever, then when you give someone a bollocking, it has a lot more power to it than if someone who is generally quite austere and severe gives someone a bollocking. Well, that's a water off a duck's back. But if somebody that is always kind and listens to you, and if they give you a bollocking, then you think to Christ, well, I must have really ballsed up. You know, do you think that, have you noticed that if you compare yourself to other social workers, that you have this effect? Do you think?
Yeah, and let me give you a good example of this. So a couple of years ago, working with some kids, and one of them was a bit wayward, and he bought an illegal off-road motorbike and was driving it around the estate, causing a nuisance. And we knew who he was. We saw him. He stopped and talked to us on the bike, and we said to him, we're not having this. You're going to kill yourself on that bike. And not only that, you could kill someone else. And we're not having this. We're doing it for you. So we reported him to the police. Police took him, confiscated his bike, crushed it, and prosecuted him. He got points on a license he didn't have and got a £70 fine, whatever. And then after he'd been to court, we saw him again on the streets. We knew what had happened. We went up to him and went, how did court go? And he went, oh. And he said to us, do you know what? I'm glad you did that, because I never thought until you said it that I could kill someone. I don't mind if I kill myself, but the thought of killing someone else, I'm glad you stopped me doing that. And then we helped him get into college. So he got into college then. And then 2 years...
You mean sixth form college?
Sixth form college. And then we sort of lost contact with him a little bit. And then he phoned us up and met us and said, I've got a place at university, but I can't afford a laptop. And I need a laptop to go. So we bought him a laptop. So there's a kid we got arrested, helped him into college, then bought him a laptop for university. And he never held it against us because we explained to him, we're doing this for your best interests. And that's what parents should be doing. Parents are stern with their children and will punish their children. They do it out of love, not out of malice. And that's why we did what we did.
Exactly. Speak roughly to your little boy and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy because he knows it teases. Speak civilly to my boy and beat him when he sneezes, or he can have the measure of the pepper when he pleases. Precisely. Do you mind me asking? Do you have children yourself?
No.
So do you think that do you think that part of the skill is that they're almost like surrogates, that you're
I have really thought about this. My friends who have got children have said to me, and my sister says to me, but Nick, you've always been great with kids. So I think I've always just been great with kids.
Why is that?
I don't know.
Why? What do you think it is about you? Because I can completely imagine it. But why do you think you're so good with kids? I mean, as a father with children, I'd like to know your secret.
I think we've all got skills. I think it's just something that's in me. It wasn't developed. I'm a little bit of a loner, so it's not like I'm an extrovert or extremely social. I'm very social, but it's not like I crave people's company. I think it was one of those things that's in me. That's all I can say, really.
Yeah, just sort of aware of children and their how they think, almost how they see, how they.
I think the skill is well, this is just me thinking. I think doesn't mean I am. I think I'm good at understanding what people are thinking and feeling. Empathy. It's always something I've always thought I was good at, is understanding a situation. I can be in a bar, especially in my younger days, and I'd say to my friends, we need to move over there because it's going to kick off here any moment. And they'd go, how do you know? I can't hear any shouting. I went, his body language, his facial expression, just we need to move. So yeah, I've been able to pick up those things. I'm reaching now. I'm just reaching.
Yeah, all right. So what other thing I'd like to ask? Some of the people I've had on this channel, and some of our viewers are fans of Nigel Farage. We talked about this before the show, who of course interviewed you on his what does he call it? His plagiarism Talking Pints, yeah, his clear plagiarism of the Jolly Heretic. Why do you think that he's obviously a very different character to you, right? He's perhaps more like me, very sort of abrasive, you know.
Yeah.
So why do you think that what you've done was of interest to GB News and Talking Pints and whatever? Well, because you were cancelled, or what was it that was?
Yeah, I've been on GB News lots and lots, dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So some of the producers there know me, they move around. So Nigel Farage wanted to talk to me about rough sleeping and homelessness, because I just wrote a book called The Making of a Beggar. And that book really is about looking at us as a society, but comparing everyday people and what we do now, comparing them to people sat on street corners begging, because I've worked with them for 15 years. And I've seen a lot of similarities now about how we're all relying now on someone else to fix our problems, someone else to give us money, someone to buy something for us. We don't want to take responsibility. It's always someone else's fault. And all those things are what people sat on the street corners begging will tell you. It's not their fault. Why can't the council give them a house? It's all, and I'm seeing the similarities all the time, that we're becoming a nation of beggars.
That's fascinating. Let's talk about that. Well, I mean, we're about halfway through, and but then let's talk about that. What do you mean by that? That's a very interesting metaphor, I think. Tell me about that. What do you mean by that? How did you come up with that idea?
So I've spent 15 years working with rough sleepers and beggars in Manchester city centre, part of the time for the council, and then my charity set up a project dedicated to it as well. Those individuals are broken. Those individuals, you end up on the streets if you break every relationship you've ever had. Family, friends, and romantic. When all of them reject you, it's obviously your fault at some level for all of them to reject you. That's you end up on the streets, usually drug, alcohol, mental health related. And then the people we're working with, trying to get them into accommodation, and then we were trying to get some of them in accommodation to get them employment. And you'd hear the same stories over and over again about how it wasn't their fault. About the council took my children off me because some neighbour reported me maliciously. The council just came and took my kids off. Councils don't want to take your children off people. How the police are picking on me. Well, you had heroin in your pocket, and it's just excuse after excuse after excuse about why they're there and it's not their fault. It's called a beggar's narrative. If it's your fault and you tell people it's your fault, they won't give you money and sympathy. So it has to be someone else's fault. And the more I worked with these people and tried to help them, and did help many of them, I then started seeing the same things with my friends and families and in society at large. The best example would be the welfare state, about how we're always saying to the welfare state, I want more. I need more of you. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. Saying to the government, you need to fix our problems. And it came to a head during COVID. And that's when I started looking at writing this book. So COVID happened. People were saying to the government, you need to lock us down harder and faster and for longer. That is their responses from people who have lost their personal responsibility, lost their agency, who are no longer captains of their own destiny. If somebody wants to lock themselves down because they're terrified of COVID, well, that's acceptable. But wanting the government to lock you down doesn't make sense. And
you want to be a prisoner, essentially. You want to be a prisoner who gets their 3 square meals a day.
Yes.
And they're exercise in the yard.
Yeah, because you want to give somebody else the responsibility for your life. Instead,
and that's what communism was, wasn't it? Communism really was the state is responsible. The state will look after you from cradle to grave.
Yeah.
you don't need to take, and this idea of rights of human. It is my right to see a doctor for free. It is my right. The state must look after me, and it's not up to me to do anything really, other than just sort of go into work and clock in and work in the most half-assed way I can, and then clock out again and binge on Netflix and video games and apps and all this bollocks. And
I tell people this little story all the time now, and I say to them, imagine a farmer with a flock of sheep. Those sheep love him. He protects them from the wolves. He looks after them. He feeds them. He spends his money paying for the vets and paying for hay and paying for extra food, and they feel safe and secure. But one day that farmer turns up with a stun gun and a butchering knife. A false sense of security isn't real security.
No, it's not. But that's what Jesus said, that he was the leader of the flock, of the sheep, of the sheeple. We're looking for our shepherd all the time. But there's the same life of Brian. You don't need to follow me. You don't need to follow anybody. You want to work it out for yourselves.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
all individuals. You're all different. I'm not, and it's the I'm not that it's that kind of mentality that you're dealing with. Lock me down harder, baby. I mean, it's fascinating. Okay, we're about halfway through. So to those of you that are new, hello, welcome to the Jolly Heretic. Oh, the poem. We have a resident poet here at the Jolly Heretic Public House. Nick, he's not here at the moment because he's on holiday in France or Italy or somewhere. And he's written a poem in honor of today's. Let me see if I can find it. Where is it? From Mr. Quinn. Yes, we are. And he writes, "Our guest gave his all for a charity, but the left, with shocking barbarity, in a terrible trick, they ousted poor Nick. But with him, we will show solidarity." So thank you very much, Mr. Quinn, for your poem. And if you would like to buy Mr. Quinn's book of Jolly Heretic Poetry, then it is, of course, available on Amazon. And if you would like to help the Jolly Heretic Public House, then you can do so in various ways. You can buy Jolly Heretic merchandise, link in the description, on Etsy. You can sign up to my course in sociobiology at Gaghan University. You can send in super chats on Entropy whenever you like, or donations. You can send in Bitcoin. You can send in chats on Odyssey. You can become one of my patrons on Subscribestar, which is we can Skype and chat and stuff like that. And you can, of course, buy my books, all of which are available on Amazon. And you can also buy Nick's books, which I assume are also available on Amazon. And you can subscribe to Nick's channel, which is called Nick Buckley, or what's it called?
All my social media is called Nick Buckley MBE.
And it's Nick Buckley MBE, so you can subscribe to Nick Buckley MBE. Hopefully they will elevate this to a knighthood, or at least a. I think my great aunt had a CBE. Which I think is the top BE.
Yeah,
she was the matron of a nursing home in Liverpool.
Yeah,
and for some reason,
commander of the British Empire, commander of the Knights of the British Empire.
Yeah, member of the Order.
Yeah.
What's OBE then? Is that just Order?
I can't remember.
Who cares?
I haven't got one.
No, you didn't. You were an MBE. Well, at least you didn't get the thing that's below an MBE, which is a Empire Medal. British Empire Medal. That's like they wouldn't even give you an MBE. Yeah. You've got a British Empire Medal. How sad. How sad. Anyway, yes. So good. So yeah. So do that. But I'll go to the questions. I haven't had that many questions. If you have any questions for Nick, we're talking Manchester. We're talking roughs. We're talking the hard life of hard knocks, all this stuff, and the stuff that he's done trying to help out this situation of the underclass in the UK. Order of the British Empire, says this Stuart. Yes, but if you are an MB, you are a member of the Order of the British Empire. If you're a CB, you're a commander of the Order of the British Empire. So OBE is the thing in the middle. I don't know if that's just all. I don't know. I can't see myself getting one at this rate, to be honest. So then do send them in, and we will of course answer them today. Now the first question we have is from Finolo O Murko, and he says this is a separate question to Mr. Buckley. Why you said? Okay, well I'll deal with that another time then. Okay, so the next question then we have is from Carlotta, and she says, has Mr. Buckley experienced working with grooming gang victims? How was it possible that grooming gangs committed so many crimes with impunity?
Yep. So in a sort of way, yes, I have. So my charity has uncovered quite a lot of sexual exploitation of children, mainly girls. I think it's like 15 girls and 1 boy, all separate incidents. We've not come across the mass grooming where, they're grooming lots and lots of girls per se. And that's quite harrowing for staff. I could tell you lots of stories, but one I'll quickly tell you was a girl in North Manchester, 12 years old, looked 12, told our staff she had 7 boyfriends, and she said all sexual. So we got talking with her, trying to find out more about, was it consensual? What was going on? Was she lying? Children like to make stories up sometimes. Turned out it was all true. She told us she felt funny in between her legs. It didn't feel right. So we took her to A&E, and she had gonorrhea at 12 years old. Got social services involved. They were already working with the family for neglect, and had no idea that she was allowing any boy in the neighbourhood to have sex with her if they told her they loved her. That's all you had to do, and she would sleep with them. So she was extremely damaged. We then
it strikes me that even I can't imagine even a 12-year-old allowing a person to have sex with them because that person said that they loved them. Was this slightly retarded 12-year-old?
No, not at all. It's learned behaviour. So single parent household, her mum had different boyfriends every couple of months, and she learned from her mum that you're validated and you gain love from men by sleeping with them. So that's what children do. Children copy adults and copy parents. That's how they learn to be adults. But if you're copying dysfunctional adults, that's a huge problem. So she was copying the behaviour she saw from her mum.
Right, and these were euphemism groomers, I take it.
These were local boys, 16, 17.
Were they non-native man? Were they? I'm trying to come up with a euphemism for. You know what I'm trying to say?
Not necessarily. This wasn't this wasn't Pakistani grooming gangs. These were local boys in her neighbourhood. I never met any of the boys. We put it all to the police and social services. I don't know the ethnicity that it worked out, but it wasn't. They weren't passing her around, and it wasn't a group thing. It was just she developed a reputation that year. So any boy who wanted to would just say, "I love you, I like you," and that was enough for her.
So basically, you've got young girls that. Sorry. So the old, there was Flanders and Swan. You remember Flanders and Swan? The Mud, Glorious Mud. You know that song, Mud, Glorious Mud. Yeah. Nothing quite like it for schooling. Right. Well, that's Flanders and Swan. No. And Flanders. One of their songs is called "Have Some Madeira, Madeira." And there's a woman in there, and it goes, she hadn't. Since she's being seduced, and she goes, since she hadn't a ma to give her advice. She hadn't a ma to give her advice, and so that because she hasn't a ma to give her advice because her mother's dead, then she does all these stupid things and she gets seduced. So we've talked about no fathers on the scene with these people, but I would have thought that their mothers would explain to them the birds and the bees and how men are gonna men are only after one thing and that you've got to be careful and all this. I mean, how can this happen that she doesn't learn that men will take advantage of you? Of course they will.
Mainly because her mum had not learnt that lesson herself. So you imagine you're a 12-year-old girl, you're living with just your mum. Social services are involved with the family already because of neglect. So you're being neglected. You don't feel loved. You get no attention. Every time your mum shows you a bit of attention because you split up from her latest boyfriend, it all stops overnight because a new boyfriend is on the scene now. You get dropped as a child the second a new man walks in the house. They nearly all move into the house. So you get no attention off your mum. Your mum's more involved with the strange man. He's hugging her, kissing her. No time for you. Children need a hug. Children need kisses. Children need that attention. And if you're not getting it from home, if somebody else in your local neighborhood will give it to you, it fills that void. And for that moment, while she's being abused, and let's be honest, she's being sexually abused by those local boys. But while it's happening, part of her feels wanted, part of her feels needed. And for those couple of minutes, it fills that void. But then, it damages her even more. But that's how some of these girls fall into that. It's just wanting to be loved, even if it's only for 5 minutes, because these children are not getting it from home. It's very sad.
But this seems to be a relatively new phenomenon. I mean, what would you put this breakdown among the, well, what we can call them, the underclass, whatever you want to call them? This just complete, has it always been like this, but there's more of them now because they breed more? Or is there something else sociologically that's gone on in the last 50 years or so that explains that it's almost like they're just feral, that they're just animals basically, that just have kids and let them bring themselves up, and just what I call are strategists that just couldn't care less. I mean, what is it that's caused this, do you think?
There's many contributory factors. And it started probably from the 60s. So suddenly you get the pill. We have more single mothers. So the state then starts paying single mothers to be single mothers, which then increases the single motherhood level. We start giving people council houses. We pay them more money not to have a man in the house. So we financially incentivize them not to have the father move in. Fathers, not having a father in the house leaves a family unprotected. If you're going to mess with a girl in a house down the road and she's got a father in that house, you risk violence. You're not sure how that man's going to take what you do to his daughter, or the slight or the disrespect to his family. You're not sure. But when there's no man in that house, easy pickings. What's the worst that can happen? Her mum might shout at you. So there's no deterrent there anymore now. So men are not involved as well, because we had feminism telling men for the last 70 years, we don't need you. We don't need you to protect us. We don't need you for money. And some men have gone, all right. So brought it on themselves. Feminists have brought a lot of this on themselves. The state then, through policies, different social policies, have rewarded poor behaviour. And then we wonder why we get more poor behaviour. And look at the prison population. Something like 75% of all men in prison come from single parent households. Every report shows us that if children don't live with both their parents, especially the father, then their outcomes in life are dramatically reduced. A child who doesn't live with their father in the house is 40 times more likely to be abused than a child who has a father at home.
I was thinking, especially at a young age, I would think. Yeah. I mean, and also, once there's the stepfathers, I mean, the statistics on that are appalling. The likelihood of being abused by a stepfather, or even a stepmother, it's above a mother, but a stepfather, it's like 100 times. If you want your child to be physically or sexually abused, particularly physically abused, give it a stepfather. That's the way forward.
And we see in the animal kingdom, most, when a lion takes over a pride, the first thing it does is kill all the baby lions. Lots of animals do this because they're not mine. I'm not spending my resources on this child or this baby lion that's not mine. Let's get rid of it.
Did you hear that? Do you hear that, single mums that are watching? Under no circumstances, if you are divorced and you have kids, marry a lion. Under no circumstance. That's the worst thing you could do. Do not marry a lion. It's just no. Like, no way. Like, marry a human at the very least. But
unless you want pride.
Very good. That's very good. Unless you want pride, yes, he will give you a certain degree of pride, but no, he will kill your kids. So don't marry. Now, people are sending in donations, which is very kind of you, but it would be good if I could actually have some questions, because I don't actually have any questions for Nick. I just have I just have donations. So if people could send in some questions as opposed to donations, that would be I'm very grateful.
Do you want me to finish what happened after I was cancelled, because it ends well?
Okay, go on then. Go.
So after I started fighting back, I joined the Free Speech Union. The Mail on Sunday did an article on me that got lots of traction around the world. And then the Free Speech Union got me a solicitor involved. He looked at my contract at the charity, And this is quite funny. And he said to me, "Who wrote this contract? It's the worst contract I've ever seen." And I went, "I wrote it." And he went, "Nick, your incompetence has finally paid off." He goes, "Because your contract has no get out clause. The charity cannot fire you unless you don't turn up for work." So we wrote to the board, said it was breach of contract, and I was going to sue them all individually unless they resign en masse. So within 18 hours of them getting that letter, they all resigned. We appointed a new board and they re-employed me back at the charity.
Right. So, and you'd written that contract yourself without any solicitor or person that could help you out, and it was that which caused the. That's excellent. That's good.
Yeah, my incompetence finally paid off.
A good. There was nothing in the contract that permitted this to occur.
No.
So that's good. And so then what? I mean, the free speech union have done some jolly good things actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Toby Young,
yeah.
and there's other people that have been on this channel whom they have successfully defended.
Yeah.
One of them is Dr. Mike McCulloch, and that they got involved with he tweeted "White Lives Matter."
Yeah.
During the same hysteria, and that was enough for them to try to sack him and whatever. But then eventually they did. So what are you doing now then? What's the so you got the charity back, and so what happened next?
So I got the charity back due to what happened to me in COVID. The charity was almost going under, so I spent a year working back at the charity to save it. Then I joined the board of the charity for a little while, and then I stepped down from the board. So now I'm just basically a volunteer. I help out wherever I can, advice, guidance, and things like that. So now I'm spending my time doing a lot of writing, and I'm putting a plan together at the moment to stand against Andy Burnham for Mayor of Greater Manchester at the elections, which will be May next year in 2024. Yeah.
So I don't know if we have any viewers that live in Manchester or Greater any drinkers here that live in Manchester or Greater Manchester, but you know who to vote for in May next year, which is Nick Buckley. And on what kind of manifesto will you be standing? What do you propose to do for the people?
So my four main policies at the moment is yes, yes, no, no. So the two yeses is yes to free speech. So if I'm elected, I'll be getting the Free Speech Union to devise a free speech charter for Greater Manchester, endorsed by the Mayor of Greater Manchester. Yes to women. So if I'm elected, we'll be having a regional definition of what a woman is. And let's be honest, it's basically going to be adult human female. Again, endorsed by the Mayor's office. And then for the no's, it's going to be no to net zero. We will not implement any policies that make us poorer, that attack car use or restrict our movement. And the final no is, when I stood last time 2-3 years ago, I had so many people say to me, "We didn't even want a mayor. No one asked us, did we want a mayor? They just gave it to us. I'm not voting because I didn't even want a mayor." So if I'm elected mayor, I'm going to hold a referendum with the people of Greater Manchester to see, do you want a mayor? And if you vote no, we'll scrap the position.
Yeah, what is the point? What powers does the powers of the Mayor of Manchester the same as the powers of the Mayor of London?
Extremely limited. So basically, the Mayor of Greater Manchester runs the police and fire service. Everything else, he has to engage the 10 local authorities to agree. So let's remove the mayor, save some money, and just get the councils to work between themselves anyway. You don't need a mayor.
Yeah, exactly. Manchester, they've coped without these elected mayors. They've just had local councils. There's a number of them, aren't there? There's Manchester, there's London. London obviously has a kind of parliament effectively related to it. Yeah. And then there's I think there's one in Stoke. There's elected mayor of Stoke, elected mayor of various northern cities. Yeah,
Liverpool and some others. Yeah.
And I've never really understood the point of them at all. But it just seems to be an extra.
When they were first announced, they sounded good when they first announced this is what they're going to do. But in practice, they've just become what everyone said they were going to become, another political position where it's just all politics. Andy Burnham's done nothing in 6 years. Andy Burnham has used Greater Manchester as a staging post to wait out Jeremy Corbyn in case that all went down the drain. And now he's waiting to get back to Westminster now because he wants to be in government next year. And he basically wants to be Prime Minister. So he's used it as a staging post. That's why he's done nothing. He's scared of making a mistake here. So he'd rather do nothing and just wait for Westminster calling.
Yeah, I suppose he sort of sees it as the Boris way of doing things. That you go out of it. You come back with experience of running something. In Boris's case, obviously, it was London. In his case, Manchester. And then you're automatically senior, and you have a power base. And he comes in and what's his name? He's such a Keir
Starmer.
Sticks him in the cabinet. Keir Starmer's boring. And he eventually replaces him. It's an understandable tactic. But how are your policies markedly different then from those that Burnham would do? I mean, you've got your key four, but on everyday bread and butter issues, what would you do differently?
So the 4 policies I've just lined out there, he's probably on the opposite end of all of them. He's trying to implement a green agenda in Greater Manchester called the Clean Air Zone, which was going to start was going to start taxing commercial vehicles to enter Greater Manchester, which is a huge area. The rest of the stuff he's been doing is just all he ever talks about is national politics, because that's what he wants to be known as, a national politician. So some of the other stuff I'll be looking at is rough sleeping in the city centre. That's slightly better than it was 6 years ago, but it's still horrendous. I want to be looking at things like knife crime. I want to look at the police. We've got a much better chief constable now for about 18 months. The last one resigned because we should have got sacked, but they let him resign. But we've got a better chief constable now, but they need help and support. If elected, it's going to really be, I'll be helping the police as much as I can.
You were saying before the show that people couldn't really give a damn about homelessness. It's not something that people vote on.
No,
I think people more was what you were saying about what it's like in Manchester, that they turn a blind eye to cottaging and God knows what. I mean, could you tell the drinkers about that? They just don't care about, people buggering each other in public, or that's people doing whatever. It's fine.
Yeah, there's an area in Greater Manchester called the Piccadilly Undercroft, which is an underground tunnel which the Rochdale Canal goes through, and there's a walkway next to it. So barges and family holiday people are going through on barges through there, not very often, a couple of times a day maybe. But it's a cut through to cut through the city centre. And in there is a male prostitution area where people go down to buy sex. But there's also a cottaging side there as well. And for people who don't know, cottaging is gay men meeting up and having sex with each other. So no money passes hand. It's just, I can imagine if women wanted more sex, men would give them more sex. So when you get 2 men together who just want sex, they get a lot more sex. That's what happens down there. And about 15 years ago, when I used to run Manchester City Centre for the council, in terms of crime and disorder, I was based in a local police station, but I was a council manager, I wasn't a police officer. And we were getting complaints down there all the time about families on barge boats complaining that we sailed past there and my 7-year-old daughter wanted to know what those 15 men were doing with the pants down because of having group sex. So we were going to enforce the lewd behaviour laws down there. I put signs up, and then the police, LGBT arm of the police, said, you can't do enforcement. You need to engage with the community first and make sure they're on board. We need to do education with these men. So we did that for a year. And then when it came to enforcement, we got told, no, we're not going to enforce these laws because nobody here wants to be called a homophobe. So we just let it go on.
Someone's saying here, Kazin is saying, this is a question for you. The life of man, pain, suffering, and responsibility. Do you think that men are afraid of collaborating with each other or engaging in productive speech because of selective prosecution, government actors, infiltrating groups, targeting by government agencies, or crimes? And what can we do about it?
I write a lot about men And I place the blame of all our problems at the feet of men for allowing this to happen. We have two roles in society: protector and provider. And even though feminism and, some of these other issues, the wokeness have all caused problems, the problems lay at the feet of men. We should have been better, and we shouldn't allow these problems to happen. So I'm really tough on men. Do men need to work together? Do you know what? I don't think they do. Men innately know what needs to be done. We've over feminized men in our society. They don't know what to do anymore now. Deep down inside they do, but they've been told that's toxic. We don't want that. Women are sending the wrong messages to men all the time. We don't need you. You don't have to protect us. But you know what? If men aren't protecting you, you're in big trouble, women. I'm telling you, you're in big trouble. We just need to be able to rebrand masculinity and get men being proud to be men again.
Muslim girls do not get groomed by groups of white men.
Yep.
And the reason for that is because there'd be serious consequences if you did that.
Yes.
From their brothers and from their fathers.
Yep.
And the fact that there are there are consequences sometimes. But if they've got, as you say, if they've got, we had this in Olu going on, and it was the men, it was these people's fathers or stepfathers even that intervened and brought it to public attention. But if you don't have people, they set up a thing in a park where they entrapped this guy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's it. And then, but no men. Then, as you say, what they're going to get, the woman's going to shout at them, is she? Oh dear. Yeah. So 50
years ago, if this would have happened 50, 60 years ago on these council estates, and someone's daughter would have been gang raped and abused, those men would have got baseball bats and they would have sorted these problems out themselves. And some of those men would have done time. And those men, while they were doing time in jail, would have said to themselves, glad I did it, because I'm there to protect my community. I'm there to protect my family. And a man's life is not as valuable as a woman's life or a child's life. So let's make that clear. Men lay down their lives all the time to protect the tribe. And that's how it's always been. And that's how it needs to be now. So, but we've weakened men so much where now men go, oh, I might be called a hurty word. Hurty word. They're raping your children. They're raping your children, and you're scared of being called a hurty word. Disgraceful.
But they do that in I guess that the context was a patriarchal context in which there is a kind of you understand that your duty is you have certain rights and obligations as a man, and the woman has different rights and different obligations, and that women are therefore the idea you open doors for women. Women always find it amazing in Finland when I do this. When I open doors for them, because Finnish men never do that, or whatever. There's this sort of deference, and once society takes that away, then there's no benefit to you being chivalrous anymore, really, other than in a dating context, I suppose.
Yeah.
So why? The other thing I was thinking about was the older generation, you're a bit older than me, but people Generation X and the millennials and whatever, school, you have sort of beaten, humiliated, and frightened into a kind of confidence, whereas now they are mollycoddled into a kind of weakness and lack of confidence. It's an extraordinary thing. These things, they can't be allowed with the feminization of education to lose at sport or not be invited to a birthday party and experience the negative feelings involved with that and come up with a way of dealing with negative feelings. At my daughter's school, they were told, please don't allow your child to bring in party invitations and distribute them. In case some kids feel left out, please deal with this over the phone with the other parents. As if the kids aren't going to find out there's been a birthday party at the weekend and they haven't been invited. But the idea of protecting them from that.
It constantly weakens children, but we do it to adults as well. Children, I was a governor at school for several years, and we would get quarterly reports on bullying incidents at school. This was a primary school. and every incident was taken seriously. And it was like, these are children, and we don't want children being seriously bullied. But the first step to bullying is you two sort this out between yourselves. Every time someone says something you don't like, don't run to a teacher and complain. It just makes you weak. And then it's only as a child in those incidents where you can start understanding and developing the skills about how you resolve issues. And that's a skill you need when you get older. And
that's what they do now. Life has become a primary school. I went into a bar and there was a man and he said a mean word to me. Or he had I'm going to go to the police.
Yeah.
And the police often will come. And why not he said a mean word to you? Say something mean back then.
Yeah.
It's the most basic thing that a dinner lady would tell you at school in the 80s. And
it goes back to the book I wrote, The Making of a Beggar. This is us begging off the state to solve our problems again, where we need to be solving our own problems and we need to be resolving them ourselves. But we've got to a stage now where we treat, to a certain extent, we treat children as adults and we treat adults as children. So if a child wants to transition and get a breast cut off and dye her hair blue, that's fine, because you can make those choices as a 12-year-old. But as an adult, we now need to treat you like a child and make sure you're not hurt, and there's trigger warnings, and you've got a safe space to go to. It's
the reversion of all that is normal. It's insane. It's just crazy. Okay, I'd like to wrap up now. So I'd like to thank Nick for coming on. It's been extremely interesting, and I'd like to thank him for the discussion. And please remember to subscribe to his channel on YouTube, Nick Buckley MBE. Please remember to buy his books, which are called
The Making of a Beggar and Lessons in Courage.
And Lessons in Courage, Making of Beggar and Lessons in Courage, which are both available on Amazon. What else? And yes, and of course his campaign. So if you're living in Manchester, then presumably you'll want to get in touch and help Nick to be ruling Manchester this time next year. Damn it, ruling it with a kind but iron fist.
Yes.
I will see you all on Monday, and goodbye.